All right. Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the UX Design Lab live stream. We had so much fun last time seeing all your amazing submissions, and so we are excited for round two on the theme of color. And just to reintroduce myself, my name is Jenny, and I am a product evangelist here at Appian and the host of the UX Design Lab series, where we focus on building UX design skills for low-code developers like yourselves, and we have our experts give direct feedback on your submissions. Before we dive in, we do have a few announcements. And so first, we want to announce the sign up for the Appian World Live Build Challenge is open, and 6 participants will face off head-to-head live in a build competition to compete for the grand prize of 15,000 US dollars. So we'll put a link to the previous challenges in the chat as well, so you can check that out. And if you're interested, definitely sign up. We also have a developer sentiment survey at the top. If you've got 5 to 10 minutes, we'd love to hear your feedback on the Appian platform to help shape Appian's future. And you also get a chance to win some awesome prizes like certification vouchers or a trip to Appian World 25. And lastly, we would love to have some of you developers speak at the Appian World Dev Day this year and play a leading role in our developer experience track at Appian World. So apply to be a speaker if you're interested, and you'll also have a chance to win a pass to Appian World, where hopefully we'll be able to meet you in person. Scan the QR codes on the screen or look for links in the description or chat to take action. And now we're ready to dive into today's UX live stream. I am thrilled to welcome back our UX expert, Christine Danzy.
Hey everyone, I'm Christine. I'm a UX manager here at Appian, and I've been here over 9 years now. And when I'm not working on our product features, I get to participate in these live streams. So always excited to talk about new topics for the day. And for today's live stream, we're going to talk about color usage. And why is that important? So marketing and branding might be an obvious reason you want to use certain colors in your UIs, but color can also be helpful in allowing the user to know what interactions they could take on the page. It grabs their attention. You can notice different announcements. It also helps them navigate the UI by understanding the overall structure and what they should be looking at, reading first, etc. So we'll be pointing out some of these items in today's interfaces during the session. And speaking of the session, thank you for all the people who are participated and submitted interfaces for us to review. Thank you so much. All participants will receive a 2025 UX Design Badge in Appian Community. And so we've selected some of these interfaces to feature today, and we'll be talking about some core concepts. The core areas we'll be looking at will be around landing pages and dashboards and kind of what patterns to look out for.
Awesome. So let's start by diving into the landing pages. And just a caveat, landing pages are not a typical use case for Appian, but the same color principles apply to general UIs and can be translated to portals or interfaces that have branding as a focus. And we also wanted to give a chance to show what is possible in Appian and highlight a few of the core concepts, as Christine mentioned. So first off, we have this landing page for the Alico Insurance Group submitted by Arian from IQVIA. Thank you so much. This is an awesome landing page right off the bat. Lots of pops of color. But Christine, tell us what you noticed first regarding color when you saw this landing page.
Yeah. So like you said, we have this core color being used across the UI. But I think what I liked, and if you don't mind scrolling down to the bottom of this landing page, is their usage of the color didn't just come from anywhere, right? So here we have a customer, maybe some sort of customer logo. And so we're utilizing this to inspire us what should be some of those core colors we use across that page. So from the beginning, I think it's super helpful if you decide, okay, maybe this core green here is what we use for our primary call to actions. Maybe the lighter green is for secondary or other kind of decorative elements. And right away, if you kind of set those colors as constants in your application and you agree how you want to use those constants, it's going to make it easier to develop in terms of how you're going to use those colors. And so I really like that was such a good starting point. And that's how you should get inspired by what colors you use for a landing page. assuming you have, something like a logo or marketing colors to start from.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. I love how there's such a cohesive sort of brand identity with this landing page. And something also I noticed is that they used a lot of words to highlight and used this green color to highlight words like love and depend. I often feel like this associates or creates an association with the brand identity. Is that sort of a common thing that you see in a lot of landing pages?
Yeah, I think it's a great way to use that color for sure. And you want to be thoughtful about where you're putting those highlights, right? Like you pointed out, like love and depend, those are like nice associations to have. You're not going to put it on like really or like can, right? So yeah, once again, just being intentional with how you use the color, and when you do it well in consistency, it creates a nice theme across the landing page.
Yeah, 100%. Anything else in terms of what we see here and their use of color?
Yeah, I also want to point out that, even though, we're just reading top down, each section is clearly identifiable because, sometimes they're using like a color to block out the section, sometimes they're just using the background color white, but it helps give these like visual differentiators in terms of each section to easily understand, like reading of the page.
Yeah, and I even noticed that they used a sort of light colored image of the beautiful Manhattan skyline here, which is also awesome. Although
Yeah.
not color, it kind of blocks it out as well.
Yeah, but still thoughtful in like the styling and color of the image too, right? So it's this lighter, like faded version of the image, which definitely allows the text to pop out more, right? If they had used something really like dark or vibrant and they didn't like think about the text color, then it could be hard to read. So even the simple act of choosing what image you display, still thinking about the colorization of it and how that would interact with the content you're displaying.
100%. All right. Well, thank you so much for Arian from IQVIA. This was a great landing page to talk about. And next up, we have the Next Gen Arena landing page, which seems to be a gaming landing page. This was submitted by Shrivishnu Muruganandam from Yexel. And right off the bat, it is a very different sort of look and feel than the previous one that we just saw. But any initial thoughts about this one?
Yeah, this one was really fun to see because, as you pointed out, this is for a gaming experience. So it lends itself to these colors, right? You have these kind of neon, bright. It's a lot of fun. Even the images they chose utilize the same colors they have across the screen. And so there's definitely like this nice, consistent theme. It's playful. And so, it's a reminder that depending on that user, depending on the context that you're building for, think about how the colors make your users feel and what you want them to feel. And so landing on this right away, we all kind of felt like, oh, this is kind of fun and exciting, right? So I think that's like a fun use of color here.
Yeah, definitely. It made me also feel like this sort of futuristic, electronic kind of almost like I'm diving into a game in itself as well.
Yeah.
And, there are a couple sort of key colors that I noticed here as well, including this purple. Also, again, used to highlight some of the main keywords or associations, probably with the brand, similar to the Alico insurance page that we just saw. But I also noticed that they had this bright pinky red color and this blue color to highlight. But what are usually the best practices with having these two different sort of highlight colors or primary and secondary colors?
Yeah, that's a good observation because I know, sometimes with applications, we just decide, okay, this is our primary color. This is what we're going to use for our interactive elements. But I have seen other apps where sometimes they have a primary accent, maybe like a secondary accent. I think the important thing there is to be consistent with how you use those colors. And I believe this dashboard actually does showcase that in a sense that I noticed like all their core like buy actions are in that like pink color, right? Probably like a core business case in terms of like promoting the user to, click buy. That's the core action. I think my only recommendation here would probably to use the filled version of this button when it's just like the outline style. It's a little harder to read against the purple background. So really making it prominent, especially if it is something we want the user to notice and kind of be drawn to in terms of like promoting what they should do next.
100%. And I know in UX design, color often acts as this key signifier to indicate affordances and visually communicate how a user can kind of interact with the elements on screen, like a button or a link, and provide those visual cues. So that's a really, really good point. All right, so this dark theme was great, and it was really interesting to just see these pops of color. So thank you so much to Shrivishnu and the Yexel team as well. And next up, we also have another bold colored landing page, and this is our last landing page that we'll talk about today. But this is the Style Seeker Maison Sinclair apparel landing page submitted by Siddharsan Salai Malai from Yexel as well. Yeah, again, initial thoughts on this really bright and bold and fun landing page.
Yeah, like you said, great words to describe this page because, as we've kind of seen from the other landing pages, we started with something kind of simple and more interesting with colors, and now we have lots of colors. But once again, it's all about how those colors are used. Because sometimes we say, hey, don't use like too many colors. It could be kind of overwhelming. But the palette they chose fits together. I think once again, the context for the colors makes sense, right? This is like a fashion website. They want it to feel modern and maybe not something we normally build once again in Appian, but it's kind of fun to see what you can build in Appian. So I think this was a fun example to see in that way for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And when you do use a lot of these bold, fun colors, do you have any recommendations on how you could make it look sort of cohesive or look like it is intentional?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's good is it was obvious they had a color palette in mind and then kind of using that consistency across the page. And then even within their sections, right, when you do have a lot of color, making sure the kind of structure itself within the sections is consistent, right? Having this like big, bold, dark titles and then these like multicolored cards still felt very cohesive. So that was nice. But yeah, this one was a lot of fun in that regard. Just all the colors, but used in a very intentional way. And I think that's something unique, though, about building the landing page in this pattern, right? When we see this type of pattern, we know it's like a scroll from top down. And so we already understand how to scan the page, read the contents. This isn't something we get for free necessarily with like some like dashboards that we'll kind of see here in a bit, because we need to draw the user's attention to certain parts of the screen. But because in a landing page, we already have that idea of how to like scan it, we can kind of get away with these multicolored blocks a bit.
Right. It's a little bit of that narrative storytelling from top to bottom. Definitely. But speaking of dashboards, we do have a couple dashboards that we're going to be looking at next. And so I would love to hear about how we use colors in dashboards typically, kind of as an overarching theme, before we dive a little bit deeper into this HR management dashboard.
Yeah, especially with dashboards, like we kind of already talked about with landing pages, it's important to understand the structure of that page, what actions I should take, where my eye should be drawn towards. So, for example, in this dashboard, right, they're using this kind of common purple theme that we notice to indicate their header, right? So the structure here is header at the top, kind of contents flow at the bottom. So that's kind of a nice indicator there. And then they're kind of using the purple across some of the other child elements on the screen.
Right. Yeah. And this HR management dashboard is more typical of a use case, probably for a lot of Appian enterprise applications. And so just giving a shout out to Vikash Kumar from Virtusa, who submitted this dashboard. I do love the purple color, like you mentioned, that they've used as kind of this theme across everything and how they've separated this header and all the KPIs. I also noticed that they used some colors here as small indicators of these positive and negative differences from last month KPIs to today's KPIs. So that was really interesting. But anything else kind of in terms of how they've used color to structure and draw your eyes and attention?
Yeah, I just want to add real quick. Yeah, good point on the KPIs, right? That's a great place to utilize color, right? To see positive trends, negative trends, helps the user kind of understand, okay, where should I be focusing my attention? If something's performing negatively, is there an action I should take to like kind of investigate or do some sort of next step? So yeah, definitely a good area to use color there. I did find it interesting though, like in the grid, if you scroll down to the employees list, um, I was drawn to the like the user column because of the purple highlight. And this is where I would just recommend to be a little bit careful, because if I'm noticing this color, I'm going to start thinking, oh, why is it highlighted? Is there some sort of notification I should be noticing? Is there some sort of action on this employee I should be doing? So if there's nothing really that needs to be drawn to in terms of that column, we might not need it. I will say though, I have seen color used well in grids to like I said, kind of point out what needs to be noticed. For instance, like a heat map, right? So kind of once again, almost like a KPI, drawing my attention to things that are going well, not going well, or things that need to be taken action on. So just being mindful of how a user might be drawn to that color and what that should mean.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good point. I even saw that even in this employees list, I thought the purple background actually fit the use case of highlighting the status of the active employees. I thought that might have been a good use of color in this case. Whereas this one, you're right, I'm not really quite sure what kind of action I could take on this column. Definitely. So, kind of bringing some of those principles to the next dashboard we have over here. This is a Debt Express dashboard, slightly different. This one was submitted by Chapala Durga Rakesh from the Mantic Global IT Solutions Group. But what are some of the first things you noticed here? I know it looks actually my eyes are drawn differently to this dashboard than the previous one.
Yeah, exactly. And unlike the other one where we had the header kind of highlighted in a way, so we kind of looked at it top down, as you probably experienced, now we have like the side pane, having more of that color. So we kind of naturally drawn to that first, and maybe so this is more of like a left to right experience. So I kind of see my notifications, maybe some core statistics, and then I start kind of scanning the rest of the page.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. And some of the things that I noticed in terms of the core statistics and the area up here are these bold sort of card backgrounds. But do you have any sort of recommendations when using these bolder colors to draw attention to metrics, for example, or the collections?
Yeah. And I think this pattern of wanting to like add color to a card is something we've seen. And like you said, it's probably to like draw the user's attention. But in these cases, you want to be careful especially if you're showing like certain text and what that text color is. And so with this kind of like stronger color, for example, on the metrics card, we have like this darker, bolder text, but then the white new text, which might not be as legible. And so in this case, you could either try having like a lighter color on the card if you still wanted to draw attention to the card, or maybe we just put this like strong color on the like icon section itself. And so you can still have that kind of pop of color, but it's not, making that card feel heavy and maybe allowing that text to read a little better.
Right. Yeah. And speaking of the lighter colors, actually, we can drill down into one of these tasks and see their summary page right over here. And I noticed that this one actually does use some of those lighter colors, but anything that we can kind of point out here on how they've used this more pastel color palette?
Yeah, and like you said, it's nice that it was lighter, so we can more easily read the text within the content of that card. What I did find interesting, even though I do still like the vibe and the color theming on this page, is it felt a bit different from the parent page. It almost didn't feel like it was the same application. So once again, something to look out for, right? As your user is interacting with your application, starting from different pages, it should still feel like it belongs to the same application, right? So how do you utilize the same theming that you had on like your main page to the other pages that you're developing? And this kind of goes back to what we kind of touched upon in terms of like, agreeing what those colors should mean, how they should be used, creating appropriate constants, and applying that throughout your application development process.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I did notice a little bit that they had these three main colors, but the meaning of the colors were a little bit confusing for me. For example, in these task sections that we just clicked on, I wasn't quite sure what this dark blue meant according to S versus, it kind of had completed here, whereas this dark blue S kind of meant in progress here. Overall was just a little bit harder for me to interpret. But in terms of having those consistent colors mean something here versus, something else maybe in this area, and then, using those same colors to mean answered, rejected, and unanswered in this area. Do
Right.
you have a little bit of a recommendation here?
Yeah, no, and I think your observations are correct. In As humans, we try to find patterns, right? We can't help but want to find meaning in what we're looking at, and we try to create rules for ourselves. So if your interface isn't obvious in terms of what something means, we're going to try and decode it. So you want it to be obvious enough where the user understands the intention and can recognize it right away. So I think that's a great point. Like even across the different elements, if it's used differently each way, it's hard for us to now understand what takeaway information I should get from this UI.
Mhm. And I know that we do have, you provided a slight change, maybe a refactor of the Debt Express page just to highlight this principle a little bit more. But could you kind of speak to what changes you've made to the dashboard to highlight this concept?
Yeah, no, and I just want to point out that Jenny and I, we worked on this together, and I think it was our way of just showing, even with these like quick fixes, it can really like bring the page together. And so, yeah, let's just highlight those first like metrics and collections card at the top. So from the previous screen, these were like we pointed out, had like the heavy color across the entire card. It made it hard to read the text, so we just kind of lightened it up, but we still put one of the heavy colors within the palette back in the icon section. And now you have like this consistent theming across these three cards at the top, and it lets the text shine through a bit more. And then going down to the My Task list, we really wanted to make sure that there was a better draw into what a color could mean. And so we wanted to be a little more intentional and just focus in on what we realized was the priority indicator. And so now we just focus it on priority. And so I
It
should
gets
be
what
able
I'm
to,
digging into.
yeah, exactly. I can see like, oh, this is high priority. I should probably look at that first, maybe then medium. And so even by just like taking away color, it allows the user to figure out what I should focus on next. And then lastly, in the side pane, once again, just some small tweaks, right? We kind of cleaned up how many colors were used within the section, and instead we just put the pink, one of the pink colors from the palette, to be the unread indicator. So once again, showing that when you kind of use it intentionally, it allows the user to understand what I should look at, what's important, what I should do next.
Right. And like we mentioned before, um, colors do mean things. Oftentimes it shows or indicates that we can interact with that object. And so having this pink color here or having a pink background here kind of looks like a button or some sort of tab that we could interact with. And then kind of draws the attention to both this pink drop down and the unread indicator, like you mentioned here. So kind of having most of the items white here, but then really drawing your attention to the unread messages, I think really highlights that and makes sure that the user is able to address those unread messages easily.
Yeah. Yeah,
All right.
overall, great dashboard. We like the color palette. And so, yeah, just with these quick fixes, could definitely, be a lot easier to scan.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Chipala and the Manic Global IT Solutions Group. And the last dashboard that we have here before we go into our shout outs is the AIMS Maintenance Vehicle Dashboard, submitted by Abdul Rahim bin Saidi from the QS Quacquarelli Simons Group. Sorry if I butchered the name of the group. But this one was a very simple sort of vehicle management dashboard. And overall kind of was a very clean look. But what are your sort of first impressions on this one?
Yeah, so like you said, this is probably a good example of maybe some sort of reporting dashboard someone might put together. We have the core KPIs on top with like the clear header and then the content below. I think some of the main things we wanted to touch on for this dashboard was the importance of like accessibility when thinking about color usage.
Mhm.
So first, when we start at the KPIs on top, I noticed that we were using different colors for each of the KPIs, and you should be mindful about that as well. But in particular, I noticed the in progress KPI and this kind of like light blue text on the white background was a bit hard to read. And so, as you're picking colors and deciding where to put them, I would also recommend, thinking about accessibility and contrast. There's some great contrast checker tools online, and you just want to make sure that the kind of foreground colors that you're using are accessible in terms of the background colors. We can also kind of see this in the top mechanics section here, where they're using like a bolder card. I'm assuming to kind of draw my attention to this section, but because of how dark and heavy this color is, some of the like red, uh, you know, trend indicator colors are also a little hard to read. So just something to look out for. I think it's great to use, the red and the green kind of to highlight the trends like we've seen in other UIs, but you still want to make sure they're easy to read.
Yeah, 100%. And kind of still speaking to the accessibility portion and how important that can be for low vision users or, people who have maybe color blindness. I also noticed that it was really hard to differentiate some of these statuses, the approved, rejected, or awaiting decision statuses in this data visualization. But, when it comes to data visualization, are there any tips that you have for making it a bit more accessible in terms of color?
Yeah, and this one's interesting because, you know, I can tell from this layout, they're going maybe for a kind of monochromatic kind of feel where we're kind of using this like purple as the core color, and then we kind of change up the shade a bit. But as you pointed out, right, it can be hard to read. So this is where I would consider, okay, we do have this primary purple. Maybe we actually do need some like secondary or tertiary colors for some of these charts to help make it a little more clear in terms of scanning this visual dashboard.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, oftentimes when you address these accessibility issues or concerns, it also makes it easier for everyone, even those without low sightedness or color blindness, to be able to easily read things and kind of scan the page, especially something that is very visually or, informationally dense like a dashboard. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Abdul and team, for this dashboard. So let's dive into some of the shout outs that we have. And this first one is a shout out that we wanted to focus a little bit on color choice. So this one was submitted by Ashwini Abhale from Yexel, the Yexel group again. And yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about color choice and how a user can select their color palette when building out a dashboard.
Yeah. No, and first of all, overall, like the structure of the page, right? We still had here's the header section and then our reporting content below. I think it was when I was starting to, recognize the colors where, it felt like we could have made, better intentional choices. So for example, in the pie chart, we have this kind of like really dark, heavy pie slice, and then this like peachy orange. But then you notice this like gold yellow, which is kind of in a similar vein of the orange, but then we also have like a dark navy blue on the right, which sometimes dark/navy kind of conflicts with like a black darker color. And so, in terms of when you're deciding what colors to use, once again, online, if you kind of search for like color palette generator or picker, it helps you create like a color family, and so it really makes the page feel like it's intentional, and so then you can then decide, okay, this is where we want to use our primary color from our color palette, our secondary colors from the palette, and they all fit well together, and ideally they feel a little more distinguishable. I think with like the peach and the gold yellow here, those are a little harder at a glance to distinguish, and so it's going to kind of help the overall feel of the dashboard in the long run.
Right. Yeah. It's like styling, together your outfits. Sometimes you have these bold colors and sometimes you have more neutral colors, but it does always look intentional and, like it fits together. And also, I think if you are having a little bit of trouble picking a color palette, you can just use Appian's out-of-the-box color palettes as well, which we
Yeah.
have design guidelines for as well.
Yeah, I was actually making a chart the other day, and so there's like the color schemes that you can choose from. We have like rainforest and parachute, so there's some fun starting points in Appian that you can get some inspiration from.
Yeah, definitely. All right. And speaking of color choices, we have a very bold color choice and color palette here on this next dashboard. And this was submitted by Nithya Balu from the Excel group. Once more, thank you so much for all of your participation. But speaking of the bold color choices, what are some of your thoughts on using bold colors in dashboards?
Yeah, I will say, I did notice that, there were some like core colors here with the kind of teals and the pinks, but they are used, across the page. So that's nice, right? We have a nice kind of color palette, color theme already shown from this dashboard. I did also want to highlight the header styling they have here. So they have like the nice, like bold header, but they use this kind of like overlay / floating pattern where the header doesn't actually take up as much space, and then the cards themselves are these like white cards, so those kind of float on top of the background. So I think this is a fun pattern to use for sure in terms of creating a structure for a dashboard.
Right. It kind of separates the header from the main content, but it doesn't feel too heavy. Like I could imagine something if it was a full black sort of header layout rather than this floating pattern.
Yeah.
So that's a really good point. Yeah. And in terms of, some of these sidecars, we had this come up in some of the previous conversations as well. But I also noticed that they used these bold colors as the background for the card layout. But do you have any recommendations on how this could be updated? I had a harder time, reading these numbers, for example, here on the side.
Yeah. And it's obvious, like the number of dashboards we see, we love adding color to cards. So that's
Mhm.
fine. We can do that. We just want to make sure we do it in the right way and that we can still read the text. So kind of similar to what we've seen on other dashboards. We, want to be intentional about where we use that color. So maybe just on the icon, maybe it's just like the lighter color, right? Or maybe it's just like a decorative bar, right? So there's ways that you can still use that pop of color to kind of signify this pain, but we don't want to, sacrifice readability.
Yeah, 100% accessibility and making sure that it's easy to read for everyone. All right. And then the last shout out that we have is BrainBridge, a training management dashboard submitted by Saumya Anandan from the Excel group. And this one does actually use lighter colors in the background for these cards, which to me was made it a lot easier to read, but still provided that pop of color.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
mhm.
I like how we've been talking about like, oh, be careful about using too dark of a color. And so what we liked about this one was the fact that they're actually showing how you can still read the content and it can still be legible if you just kind of use like a lighter shade of maybe the color palette that you're working with.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Um, you know, however, like I did love the use of the lighter color here, but I also noticed that they used this sort of bolder neon color that drew my attention first. So, like get access, for example, is probably a really important call to action or CTA. So my eyes were kind of drawn first to the side panel just because I read left to right, and then this piece over here. But I did find that there was a lot of use of color on this dashboard, and it was harder for me to kind of draw my attention after seeing these main points of attention.
Yeah, no. First of all, I want to say you gave a great example of how, right, the color choice that you use on your dashboard will draw your users' attention, right? If there's something you want them to notice first or take action on first, you kind of notice that with the kind of the side pane and then the get access card, right? So
Right.
utilize color to your advantage in that way. But yeah, when we get to like the body of the interface, it's nice when maybe a secondary section has like all these colors to draw your attention. But as you saw, when new courses uses all the colors and my assignments have all those colors, and then daily schedule has the same set of colors. It might be hard to know, okay, what should I look at next, right? What's the most important next thing that should draw my attention? So kind of being mindful there, and maybe recognize, okay, maybe only one section should have these colors, and maybe the other sections we just have, a light/white background, so we don't, confuse the user on where to scan the page next.
Yeah, 100%. And we did make a refactored version just to show this very small change and how it might look, and draw like a different narrative in terms of how we can scan the page. But can you talk a little bit about the changes that we've made here?
Yeah, and like Jenny said, it's not like we made like major changes, right? We're just trying to show you that even small quick fixes can really just clean up the UI. So we ended up just keeping the colors in the top section for the new courses and letting the content below kind of, made more neutral. So that way we're not too distracted by all the other colors.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that allows, at least for me, it allowed me to pick what section I wanted to pay attention to a little bit more. So instead of being immediately drawn to this one yesterday's winner, if that's not something that interests me as much, but I'm more interested in my daily schedule, it allowed me to make that sort of decision, which I thought was nice.
But overall, yeah, I really like their different stylings of the sections as well. So this was a really fun example of like color usage and kind of just like section styling. So really great job, team.
Yeah, really great job. All right. I think that wraps it up for all of our feedback and your submissions. And to everyone who submitted their interfaces, thank you so much. Before we go, we do want to make sure you check out the announcements that we mentioned earlier in the live stream. So we do have the AW 2025 Live Build Challenge, like we mentioned, the Developer Sentiment Survey, and the Appian World Dev Day call for the speakers. So make sure to check those out. They will be in the description below. They are in the chat if you're joining us live, as well as the QR codes on the side. So thank you so much, everyone, for submitting. And thank you, Christine, for your expertise once again. This was so much fun. I love talking about colors. There's so much psychology and fun things that you can do with colors. So yeah, this is great.